My name is Arthur Vance. I'm 62 years old, and I have just navigated the most turbulent 6 months of my entire existence. Picture this. You're coming home from a long, overdue trip, a sense of peace in your soul, only to find the world you left behind has shattered. That was my reality when I discovered my only son, Leo, clinging to life alone in an intensive care unit. A symphony of machines was the only thing keeping him in this world. His wife, Isabella, she was nowhere in sight. Not a single text message, not one phone call to me, his father. But the truly gut-wrenching part came when I started to investigate my daughter-in-law's disappearance. I peeled back layers of deceit and treachery that made my very core tremble with rage. She hadn't just walked away from my son in his darkest hour. She had systematically stripped him of his assets and run off with another man. Before I detail how I stood my ground, fought back, and ultimately triumphed, I ask you to please take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if this story resonates with you. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. My name is Arthur, and this is my story. The ride share dropped me off at my son's home in Denver, just past the stroke of midnight. I had caught the first flight back from a fishing trip in Alaska, cutting it short after 2 weeks of my calls to Leo going straight to his voicemail. The house was completely dark, not even a porch light on to welcome a visitor. Leo's truck was missing from the driveway. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach as I struggled with the spare key I always carried. Once inside, I found a carpet of mail covering the floor of the entryway. Hospital bills, statements from his insurance company, every single one of them unopened. My hand shook as I bent down and picked up an envelope from Denver General Hospital, stamped with the word urgent. The postmark was from 5 days ago. I tried Leo's cell phone again. It went directly to voicemail. I called Isabella. The exact same result. My paternal instinct, that deep, unexplainable connection you have with your child, was screaming at me that something was fundamentally wrong. I raised Leo on my own after his mother passed away when he was just a boy. We share a bond, the kind where you can just sense when your child is in trouble. I didn't even bother to take my luggage upstairs. I just grabbed my wallet and keys and ordered another car to take me to Denver General. The emergency room was a jarring blaze of fluorescent lights, and the sterile, antiseptic smell assaulted my senses. At the information desk, a woman with weary eyes typed on her keyboard in slow, deliberate strokes. "I'm searching for my son, Leo Vance," I managed to say, my voice trembling. Her fingers stopped moving. She glanced up at me with that guarded expression that hospital staff reserve for delivering terrible news. "Are you Arthur Vance?" "Yes. How did you?" "We've been making every effort to contact a family member. Your son is on the 5th floor, in the ICU. He's been with us for 5 days. 5 days. My knees felt weak, almost giving way beneath me. The elevator ride to the 5th floor felt like it stretched into an eternity. As the ICU doors slid open, I saw him through a glass window. My strong, energetic 35-year-old son was lying there, utterly still. Tubes seemed to snake from every part of his body. Machines beeped, marking the rhythm of his mechanically assisted breaths. Dr. Evans, the physician in charge, found me in the hallway. His face was somber. "Mr. Vance, your son was involved in a very serious single-vehicle accident on I-70. He has a traumatic brain injury and several fractures. We've stabilized his condition, but—" He paused, searching for the right words. "The first 72 hours were exceptionally critical. We made numerous attempts to get in touch with his wife. Where is Isabella?" The question escaped my lips with more force than I intended. The doctor shared a look with a nearby nurse. She was here on the first day. She signed some initial paperwork. We haven't seen or heard from her since." The nurse, a compassionate-looking woman named Sarah, gently touched my forearm. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "But your daughter-in-law seemed far more preoccupied with the insurance paperwork than with your son's actual medical state. She disappeared right after we informed her there was a problem with his policy." "A problem with his policy?" Leo was always so diligent about things like insurance. He learned that lesson from me after we had to navigate the mountain of medical debt left after his mother's illness. Something was deeply wrong here. I spent the remainder of that long night by Leo's side, holding his hand, speaking to him, and praying for any sign of hope. The monitors kept up their steady, rhythmic beeping. The ventilator whooshed and clicked. But my son gave no response. Where was his wife? Where was the woman who, just 3 years prior, had vowed to love him in sickness and in health? As dawn's first light filtered through the ICU windows, the hospital's administrative coordinator tapped softly on the doorframe. "Mr. Vance, I'm sorry to disturb you, but we must address the matter of your son's medical coverage. There appears to be a major issue." The administrator's words felt like a punch to the gut. The health insurance policy had been terminated 3 days before the accident. "The cancellation was initiated by the primary holder of the account," she explained. "That's not possible," I insisted. "Leo would never do that. The primary account holder was Isabella Vance. She had your son removed from the policy before canceling it completely, just 3 days before the crash." The cold, calculated nature of her actions made me feel physically ill. I pulled out my checkbook and wrote a check for $75,000 from my retirement fund to cover the initial expenses, my hands shaking more from pure rage than from fear. After a 35-year career as a bank CEO, I knew exactly how to trace a money trail, and Isabella had just made a catastrophic error. I drove to Leo's house in the Highlands, the spare key feeling unnaturally heavy in my palm. The entire place had an air of desertion. In their master bedroom, Isabella's side of the closet was completely empty, with discarded hangers littering the floor, as if she had packed in a tremendous rush. But she had made a mistake. She'd left Leo's laptop sitting on his desk. I knew his password. He'd been using the same one since he was in high school, his mother's birthday, followed by mine. The email inbox took a moment to load. The third message in the list was an unusual activity alert from Chase Bank. My stomach plunged. Their joint savings account had been completely drained. $250,000 had been moved to Isabella's personal account in a series of 3 transfers. All of this occurred while Leo was lying unconscious in a hospital bed. The timestamp on the final transfer was just 2 hours after his accident. My professional instincts took over. I began to meticulously document everything, taking screenshots, saving transaction records, noting down dates and times. Then, I saw that Isabella's Gmail account was still logged in on a separate browser tab. Was it carelessness or arrogance? I suspected it was a bit of both. And there it was, a flight confirmation from United Airlines. 2 first-class tickets to Cancun. The passengers were Isabella Vance and a Julian Croft. The flight had departed the day after Leo's accident. They had used my son's credit card to book an oceanfront suite at a luxury resort. A text message notification appeared on the laptop screen from a number I didn't recognize, but the preview was damning. "Babe, you need to stop worrying about Leo. He was never good enough for you. I can't wait to see you in that new bikini." It was signed with the initial J. I photographed every last piece of it. My hands were no longer shaking. They were firm, driven by a newfound purpose. The initial wave of rage had cooled and hardened into something more focused, more dangerous. Isabella was convinced she had gotten away with it. She believed she could ruin my son's life and simply walk away a wealthy woman. She had absolutely no concept of who she had just provoked. I kept digging and found more. So much more. Credit cards pushed to their limits. A loan application for $400, zero taken out against their house, bearing Leo's signature. But even to my untrained eye, the signature was a clear forgery. The loan had been approved just a week before. The funds had already been dispersed. But the most chilling discovery was in her browser's search history. How long for head trauma victim to be unconscious? Can a power of attorney be changed if a spouse is in a coma? Mexico extradition policies? She had been planning this. Maybe not the accident itself, but she had certainly mapped out her escape. I called David Chen, a man I used to work with, who was now one of the most respected family law attorneys in the city. We had collaborated on intricate financial cases when the bank's interests were at stake. David, it's Arthur. I need you. Now. Arthur, it's been ages. What's happened? My son is in a coma, and his wife has vanished with every penny he has. Can you meet me at Denver General in an hour? I'll be there in 20 minutes. I made my way back to the ICU, where Leo remained motionless. Sarah was there, adjusting his IV drip. Any change? I asked, though I expected none. His vitals are holding steady. That's a positive sign. He's a fighter. She paused for a moment. I heard that you're paying for his care out of your own pocket. That's a wonderful father. A father does what's necessary, I said, taking hold of Leo's hand once more. And what's necessary right now is to ensure the person who did this to him is held accountable for every ounce of suffering she's inflicted. Sarah gave a slow, understanding nod. I've witnessed many families in crisis here, but to abandon someone in this state while simultaneously stealing from them, that's a different level of evil. Evil. Yes, that was the word for it. But evil wasn't invincible. Evil could be confronted. Evil could be brought into the light. And I possess 35 years of financial knowledge that Isabella knew nothing about. If she actually thinks she can outrun this, I said in a low voice to my unconscious son, she's about to find out that she chose the wrong family to try and tear apart. I sat there by Leo's bed, clasping his unresponsive hand, observing the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest, dictated by the ventilator. The monitors beeped their constant mechanical rhythm, a stark reminder that he was still with me, still in the fight. My thoughts drifted back over the last few years, desperately seeking any red flags I might have overlooked. Isabella had always shown a keen interest in our finances. How much did Eleanor's life insurance pay out? What's the value of your retirement portfolio? Is Leo set to inherit anything substantial? At the time, I had dismissed it as her simply being prudent, planning for their shared future. My God, I had been so naive. She had consistently found reasons to avoid visiting for holidays, always coming up with flimsy excuses to skip family get-togethers. When Leo, on my recommendation, brought up the idea of a prenuptial agreement, she had put on a theatrical display of tears for days, accusing him of not trusting her. He, of course, had backed down. My kind, trusting son, who always chose to see the good in people. David arrived in 20 minutes, just as he'd promised. His gray hair perfectly styled, exuding the same air of confidence he'd had for decades. He saw the look on my face and immediately pulled me into a brief, firm hug. Start from the beginning, he said. I laid out all the evidence for him, every single screenshot, every bank statement, every fraudulently signed document. David's expression became progressively grimmer as he reviewed each piece of information. This is wire fraud, forgery, and identity theft, he stated, his voice sharp. These are federal offenses. But Arthur, we have to act immediately. She could be moving that money to an offshore account as we speak. Tell me what to do. First, we petition for an emergency injunction to freeze every last one of their accounts. I can get that before a judge in a matter of hours. Second, we need to establish your power of attorney over Leo's affairs. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a file I had grabbed from the house earlier. I have the durable power of attorney he signed when he was still single. He never got around to revoking it. David's eyes widened. He never revoked it? Arthur, that's our silver bullet. Isabella probably doesn't even know it's valid. There's more, I said, my voice heavy. David, I found something else. I showed him the paperwork for the new mortgage. She forged his signature to get a 400-0 loan against the house. The money is already gone. David let out a low whistle. That's another federal charge. This woman is more than just a parasite, Arthur. She's a professional criminal. He took out his phone. I'm calling Agent Miller at the FBI. We were in law school together. This crime crosses state lines, from Colorado to Mexico, that puts it squarely in their territory. While David was on the phone, I returned to Leo's bedside. His hand felt warm in mine, a tangible sign of the life still within him. I'm going to handle this, son, I whispered. Your old man has this under control. Dr. Evans came by on his rounds. We're seeing a slight improvement in his brain activity, he reported. It's a small change, but it's measurable. Keep talking to him. It can make a difference. After the doctor left, I took out my own phone and began my own line of inquiry. Isabella's Instagram profile was still set to public. And there she was, in a photo posted just 6 hours earlier, raising a champagne flute on a yacht off the coast of Cancun. The caption read, "Living my best life. Sometimes you just have to choose yourself. New beginnings. Finally free." The comments section was filled with messages from her friends, praising her for her brave choice to leave what they called a toxic marriage. My blood ran cold. Toxic. Leo had adored her. Then, I spotted him in the background of another picture. Julian Croft. A quick online search revealed he was a real estate developer in Cancun with a string of complaints filed against him with the local authorities and a lawsuit for fraud from a few years back that had been settled out of court. David returned, his expression grim but resolute. The judge has signed the emergency order. As of... He glanced at his watch. Right now, all of their accounts are frozen. Isabella can't access a single dollar, and Agent Miller is launching a federal investigation. What about the house? We'll file a motion to have the fraudulent loan nullified. With clear evidence of forged signatures, it should be a straightforward process. But Arthur, he said, sitting down next to me, prepare yourself. This is about to get very nasty. Isabella will fight us on this. Let her. I said, my voice like ice. I spent my career dealing with white-collar criminals who believed they were smarter than everyone else. She is about to find out what happens when you try to swindle my family. David gave my shoulder a firm squeeze. That's the Arthur I remember. The one who exposed that embezzlement scheme at our old bank. That was just business, I said, my gaze fixed on my son's pale, still face. This is personal. If she thinks she can just run away, I added, she's already made her final mistake. I know precisely where she is, who she's with, and I have a record of every dollar she's spent. Tomorrow morning she's going to wake up and discover that every cent she stole has been locked away. David's law firm was a hive of activity by 7:00 a.m. the following morning. A team of paralegals was busy preparing documents while David directed the war room we had established in his conference room. I had hardly slept, but a surge of adrenaline kept me focused. The freeze order is officially active. David confirmed. Isabella just attempted to use Leo's credit card at a high-end boutique in Cancun an hour ago. The transaction was declined. Good, I said. Let that be the first taste of what's to come. What's our next step? We file everything at once, David explained, laying out a stack of documents on the large table. A civil suit for the conversion of assets, criminal complaints for the wire fraud and forgery, and an emergency petition to grant you sole power of attorney. But we need more proof of her intent. I have an idea, I interjected. What if we hire a private investigator in Cancun? Someone who can get photographic evidence of what she's doing with the stolen money. David cracked a smile. I'm already on it. A guy named Rick O'Connell, ex-DEA. He owes me one. He picked up his phone and made the call. Rick, it's David Chen. I need surveillance on a subject in Cancun. Yes, starting immediately. An hour later, Rick called back. Your target is staying in the penthouse suite at the Grand Lux. It's costing about $3,000 a night. She's with a man named Julian Croft. I know of him, a small-time fraudster who targets affluent women. They've been making the rounds at exclusive clubs, buying expensive jewelry, living it up. Document every single thing, David instructed. We need photos, receipts, any witnesses you can find. I'm on it. She just spent $20,000 at a designer watch store, all charged to credit cards in the name of Leo Vance. $20,000. While my son was here fighting to stay alive, our next destination was the federal courthouse in downtown Denver. David had secured an emergency hearing with Judge Elizabeth Reynolds, a judge known for her zero-tolerance policy on financial crimes. Your Honor, David began, we are here today with evidence of systematic financial exploitation and spousal abandonment. The defendant, Mrs. Isabella Vance, liquidated marital assets while her husband lay in a coma, forged his signature on a $400,000 mortgage, and then absconded from the country with the funds. The judge carefully examined the evidence we presented, her expression hardening with every page she turned. This is profoundly troubling, she said. Where is Mrs. Isabella Vance at this moment? She is in Cancun, Your Honor, residing in a luxury hotel with her accomplice, spending the very money she stole. I am granting a temporary restraining order on all assets and issuing a warrant for civil asset recovery. Mr. Vance, as power of attorney, you are granted full authority to begin the process of reversing all fraudulent transactions. The judge's gavel struck the sound block with a sharp crack. Furthermore, I am referring this entire case to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. We were making progress, but I felt no sense of victory. Not while Leo was still unconscious. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was an international number. Arthur, what did you do? Isabella screamed into the phone. None of my cards are working. The hotel is about to kick us out. You stole from my son while he was on the brink of death, I replied, my voice dangerously calm. What did you think would happen? He's not dying. He'll be fine. The doctor said he would recover. You haven't bothered to call the hospital a single time to find out. You have no idea what the doctor said. I don't owe you any explanation. That money is mine. I am his wife, a wife who left him for dead and stole his life savings. The FBI is very interested in discussing that with you. There was a moment of silence on her end. Then her voice was much quieter. The FBI? Wire fraud across state lines. Forgery. Identity theft. And your new friend, Julian, he has a history of fraud, doesn't he? That's not going to play well with a jury. You can't prove any of it. I have it all, Isabella. Every last email, every transaction record, every forged document. And let's not forget your Instagram posts from the yacht while Leo was on a ventilator. It's all very compelling. I'll sue you for harassment. Please do. I said. I would relish the opportunity to have you questioned under oath. She hung up. Rick, our PI, called an hour later. She's in a full-blown panic. Julian just learned about the FBI's involvement. They had a massive argument right in the hotel lobby. Hotel security had to intervene. He's packing his bags to leave. Without her. The rats are abandoning the ship. She's down at the hotel bar, crying into a glass of champagne. David looked at me. We could propose a deal. If she returns all the money and agrees to a swift divorce, we could agree not to push for a long prison sentence. No deals, I stated firmly. She left my son to die. She will face the full consequences of her actions. That evening, I sat with Leo again. His complexion seemed to have a bit more color, and Sarah, the nurse, mentioned that his reflexes were showing signs of improvement. We're making headway, son, I told him. She is not going to get away with this. His finger moved in my hand. It was just a slight twitch, but it was a voluntary movement. Leo, can you hear me? Another twitch, this one more pronounced. I called for Dr. Evans, who hurried into the room. This is a significant step forward, he said. He's reacting to your voice. Keep talking to him. Progress. At last, I squeezed Leo's hand. You just focus on your fight in here, I whispered. I'll handle the one out there. And when you wake up, this entire nightmare will be behind you. My phone vibrated. It was a text from David. Isabella is trying to buy a ticket for a flight to Brazil. Airport authorities have been alerted. She thought she could run. But I had learned one fundamental truth during my 3 decades in the banking industry. Money always leaves a trail. And Isabella had left behind a superhighway, day 47. A new kind of normalcy had set in. I'd start my mornings with coffee in the ICU waiting area, spend 4 hours with Leo, have lunch in the hospital cafeteria, and then another 4 hours at his bedside before heading home to go over legal paperwork with David. The nurses all knew who I was. Even the janitorial staff would stop to say hello. I had become a fixture in the hospital's daily life. But that morning felt different. Leo's hand felt warmer in mine. His breathing seemed to be straining against the steady rhythm of the ventilator. Dr. Evans had told me they were considering an attempt to remove the breathing tube in the near future. I was reading him the sports page. The Broncos were having a dismal season when his eyelids began to flutter. Leo, his eyes opened. They were unfocused at first, but then they gradually found my face. He tried to form words, but the tube in his throat made it impossible. His hand squeezed mine, this time with genuine strength. Don't try to speak, son. You're in the hospital. You've been in an accident. You're going to be okay. His eyes darted around the room, a look of panic beginning to form. He mouthed a single word around the tube. Isabella. My heart ached. After all this, his first thought was of her. Dr. Evans and a team of nurses hurried in. Mr. Vance, I'm Dr. Evans. You're at Denver General Hospital. We're going to take out the breathing tube now. It might be a little uncomfortable. The process of removing the tube was difficult to watch. Leo gagged and coughed, but then he took a breath on his own. Dad, his voice was a raw, hoarse whisper. What happened? Where's Isabella? Dr. Evans gave me a pointed look. Let's give him a moment to get his bearings, Mr. Vance. You've been unconscious for 47 days. We need to take this slowly. Once the medical staff had left, Leo grabbed my hand. Dad, where is my wife? Is she all right? Was she in the accident with me? I had played this conversation out in my mind countless times, but nothing could have prepared me for the raw anguish in his eyes. She wasn't in the truck with you, son. You were by yourself, but she should be here. Why isn't she here? His voice began to crack. Did something happen to her? Leo, I said, pulling out my phone and showing him the current date. Isabella left, son. She left the day after your accident. Left? What are you talking about, left? Left the hospital? I couldn't soften the blow. He needed to know the truth. She cleaned out your bank accounts and flew to Cancun with another man. The heart monitor beside his bed began to beep erratically. No, you're wrong. Isabella loves me. We were talking about starting a family. He tried to push himself up and cried out in pain. Son, please, you have to try and stay calm. Show me some proof. You never really liked her. You're just saying this. The accusation was like a knife, but I knew it came from a place of shock and disbelief. I opened my briefcase and took out the file I had been carrying with me everywhere for weeks. The bank statements, the credit card bills, the forged mortgage application, and finally, the photos Rick had taken in Cancun. Isabella on a yacht with Julian, laughing, a glass of champagne in her hand, the date and time clearly visible. 5 days after Leo's accident. He looked at each document, his expression slowly crumbling. She took it all. 250. 0 from your joint account. She maxed out all your credit cards, and she forged your name on a 400 mortgage. The house? She took out a mortgage on our house while you were lying here in a coma. Yes. He began to cry, silent tears streaming down his face. I loved her, Dad. I gave her everything I had. Why? I carefully sat on the edge of his bed, mindful of his injuries, and put my arm around him, holding him like I did when he was a little boy. Because some people are just fundamentally broken, son. This is not your fault. I should have known. You tried to warn me. She was always asking about money. You saw the best in her. That's not a character flaw, Leo. That's who you are. We sat like that for what must have been an hour. My son weeping for the loss of a 3-year love that had been a lie. The nurses gave us our space, quietly bypassing the room. Finally, he leaned back, wiping the tears from his eyes. What's happening now? The police? The FBI is handling the case. They're pursuing charges of wire fraud, forgery, and identity theft. She was arrested but is out on bail. We have a restraining order against her, and all the assets are frozen. David Chen is representing us. Uncle David. Good. He was silent for a few moments. Dad, the night of the accident. I'm starting to remember something. My heart began to race. What do you remember? Isabella was insistent that I drive that night. I had just come off a 12-hour shift at work. I told her I was dead tired, but she claimed she'd had a glass of wine with dinner and couldn't drive. But I don't remember seeing her drink anything. Are you certain? She ordered wine, but she barely touched it. She said it tasted funny, and she was constantly on her phone, texting someone and smiling. When I asked who it was, she said it was her sister, but her sister lives in New York. It would have been after midnight there. Leo, this is very important. Was there anything else? Anything about the truck? The brakes. They felt spongy, soft. I had mentioned it to Isabella the day before. I told her I was going to take it into the shop. She told me I was just being paranoid. A cold dread washed over me. We have to tell the police. Dad, he said, his grip on my hand tightening. What if she wanted this to happen? The question lingered in the air between us, too horrifying to fully process. My daughter-in-law hadn't just stolen from my son. She may have tried to kill him. Leo's new memory changed the entire scope of the investigation. I immediately called David, and then Detective Marcus Riley from the Denver PD, who was handling the local aspect of the financial crimes case. We need to have the vehicle inspected, Detective Riley said. Do you know where it is? It's in an impound lot, I told him. It's been there since the night of the crash. I'll get a warrant. If those brake lines were tampered with, this case moves from financial fraud to attempted murder. While the detective focused on the truck, I started to dig even more into Isabella's digital footprint. Leo, his phone having miraculously survived the crash intact, gave me his passwords. What I discovered next made my stomach clench. 2 months before the accident, Isabella had taken out a $1 million life insurance policy on Leo. She was listed as the sole beneficiary. The initial premium payment had been made, unsurprisingly, with Leo's credit card. "Dad," Leo said from his hospital bed, "there's more. Look at her search history on the laptop again." I had already seen some of it, but this time I went further back in the history, 2 weeks before the crash. How do vehicle brake systems work? Symptoms of brake fluid leak. Survival rates, single vehicle accidents. How long for life insurance to pay out? My God, I whispered to myself. David arrived with an update. Rick O'Connell tracked down Julian Croft. He's prepared to testify against Isabella in exchange for immunity. Immunity from what? He claims Isabella approached him 3 months ago with a scheme. She was going to get a large sum of money from her husband, and they would start a new life together. He swears he had no knowledge of any plan to harm Leo. He thought she was just going to file for divorce. And we're supposed to believe him? He has text messages. In one of them, Isabella wrote, "This will all be over soon. You just have to be patient. We're going to have more money than we ever imagined." The message is time-stamped 3 days before Leo's accident. Then, Detective Riley called. The brake lines were cut. It wasn't a clean cut, just a small incision designed to cause a slow leak. The truck would have seemed perfectly fine for a day or two, and then the brakes would have failed completely. "She tried to murder my son," I said, the words catching in my throat. "We are upgrading the charges to attempted murder. Where is she now?" Rick had been keeping tabs on her. "She's at a cheap motel near the airport. She moved there after the money was frozen. Julian left her about 2 weeks ago. We'll be apprehending her tonight." I went back to Leo's room. He was in a session with a physical therapist, relearning how to walk. His legs were unsteady, but he was on his feet. "That's it, Mr. Vance," the therapist said encouragingly. "Just 3 more steps." He managed to take 5 before he had to stop from exhaustion. Progress. After the therapist left, I told him about the brake lines. His face grew pale. "She really tried to kill me. The police believe so. They are arresting her tonight." "Our entire marriage. Was any of it real?" "I don't know, son. Perhaps at the beginning, or perhaps never." That evening, David called with a revelation that stunned even him. "Arthur, you are not going to believe this. I was doing a background check on Isabella for the trial. Her legal name isn't Isabella Vance. It's not even Isabella Romano, her maiden name. What are you talking about? Her real name is Chloe Martinez. She's been married twice before. Both of her previous husbands died in accidents within 2 years of their weddings. Both of them had substantial life insurance policies. My knees felt like they were about to buckle. She's a serial predator. The FBI is reopening both of those cases. Arthur, Leo is incredibly lucky to be alive." I looked at my son, who was finally sleeping soundly, and I felt a cold, hard rage that was unlike anything I had ever experienced. This woman, this monster, had specifically targeted my son, married him with the sole intent of murdering him for his money. My phone rang. It was Detective Riley. "We have her. She's in custody. The judge denied bail." "Good. She's asking to make a deal. She claims she has information about other crimes." "Other crimes?" "She won't specify. only that she's willing to talk if we agree to take the death penalty off the table. Colorado had the death penalty for first-degree murder. The thought of Isabella, or Chloe, or whoever she was, trying to bargain for her own life after my son had to fight for his, filled me with disgust. Miss Vance, the DA needs to know if you and your son would be agreeable to a sentence of life without parole, instead of pursuing a capital case. I considered it. A death sentence would be a quick end, but life in a prison cell, with the knowledge that she had failed, that she would never experience freedom again, that felt like a more fitting punishment. I'll discuss it with Leo. When I laid out the situation for him, Leo was silent for a long time. I don't want her to die, Dad, he finally said. I want her to spend every single day for the rest of her life living with what she did. My brave, compassionate son. Even after everything she had put him through, he chose mercy over revenge. The next morning, it was the front-page story of the Denver Post. Black widow arrested in Denver. Local woman suspected in series of murder-for-profit plots. Isabella's mugshot was there for all to see. She looked so different without the designer clothes and perfect makeup. So ordinary. Evil so often does. Dad, Leo said, looking at the newspaper, thank you. For everything, for fighting for me when I couldn't. That's what fathers do, I said, squeezing his hand. We protect our children, no matter what. You're listening to my story, and I imagine many of you may have felt the sting of betrayal from someone you once trusted. If this story is moving you, please press that like button and consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you or someone you know has been through a similar ordeal, please leave a comment. Our community is a place of support. We often feel isolated in our darkest moments, but you are not alone. There are people who understand. People who will stand up for you when you don't have the strength to stand for yourself. Now, let me tell you about the shocking twist that came next. The video conference was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Isabella, I still couldn't bring myself to think of her as Chloe, appeared on the screen from a federal detention center, her designer wardrobe replaced by a standard-issue orange jumpsuit. Her attorney had arranged the call to discuss a potential plea agreement. David sat next to me in his office. Leo was still recovering in the hospital, but he was stable. We had decided I would handle this part on my own. Isabella's face appeared on the monitor, without makeup, her hair unstyled. The glamorous facade she had so carefully constructed was completely gone. She looked diminished, unremarkable, like someone you wouldn't notice in a grocery store. "Hello, Arthur," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Isabella, or do you prefer Chloe?" "Isabella is fine. It's my legal name now." The sheer audacity of it. "You tried to murder my son. That's the allegation." The brake lines were cut. "You purchased a life insurance policy. You researched fatal car accidents. We have it all." She was silent for a beat. "You always were a sharp one. I warned Leo that you would be a problem. A problem for trying to shield my son from a killer? I'm not a killer. No one is dead, and not for your lack of trying. What about your 2 previous husbands?" Her lawyer, a weary-looking man from the public defender's office, cut in. "My client is here to discuss the terms of a plea bargain." David leaned into the camera's view. 25 to life for the attempted murder, plus an additional 15 years for the fraud charges to be served consecutively. That is our final offer. That's a minimum of 40 years. Isabella's composure finally started to fray. "I'll be nearly 70 years old before I'm even considered for parole." "You attempted to end my son's life for a paycheck," I said. 40 years is a gift. He was never supposed to make it," she blurted out, and then immediately tried to backtrack. Her lawyer visibly winced. "Isabella, please." But the mask had slipped. The real person was now on display. "You had this all planned out, from the very beginning, didn't you?" I asked. "The wedding, the insurance, the accident? You want to know the truth, Arthur?" Isabella leaned closer to the camera. "Your precious son was an easy mark. So desperate for affection after his mother died, he was so willing to hand over everything, the house, access to his accounts, his credit cards. He practically begged me to take his money. He loved you. He loved what I represented, the beautiful wife, the future mother of his children. He never took the time to see who I really was. And who are you, really? A survivor. I came from nothing. Trailer trash. That's what they used to call me. I figured out a long time ago that the only way to get ahead was to take what you needed. By killing people? By being smarter than everyone else. Your son wasn't smart. He was soft." David placed a hand on my arm under the table, a silent gesture to keep my temper in check. "Soft?" I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "He survived what you did to him. He's learning to walk again. He is going to testify against you, and he will be in that courtroom to watch you get sentenced to spend the rest of your life in a prison cell." The bravado on Isabella's face began to evaporate. "I won't accept the deal." "Then we'll see you at trial," David said coolly. "Attempted murder in the first degree. The death penalty will be on the table." "You said Leo didn't want that." "He's had a change of heart," I lied. "Especially after he learned about your other husbands." A flicker of genuine fear appeared in her eyes. "They can't prove anything about them. The FBI seems to think otherwise. They are in the process of exhuming both bodies. It's remarkable what modern forensic science can uncover." Isabella turned to her lawyer and began whispering frantically. He shook his head and whispered back. "We'll accept the plea," he finally announced. 40 years. 50, I said. "For what you did to my son, the price is 50 years. David glanced at me, surprised. "This wasn't part of our plan." Isabella's lawyer began to protest, but she held up her hand to silence him. "Fine, 50 years, but I wanted in writing that Leo will not pursue a civil lawsuit against me." "He has already won the civil case by default," David informed her. "You have been ordered to pay him $2.8 million in damages." "I don't have any money." "Then you'll work in the prison laundry and pay him what you can. Every single dollar you earn for the rest of your life will go to Leo." The look of utter defeat on Isabella's face was absolute. "Fine. One last condition," I added. "You will provide a full written confession, detailing everything. The FBI is particularly interested in your previous husbands. If I do that, I'll never have a chance of getting out." "You're not getting out anyway. This way, at least their families will finally get some answers." Isabella stared at me through the screen. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "No," I said, and I meant it. "I am not enjoying any part of this. My son was nearly killed. He will carry the emotional scars of this for the rest of his life. But I do feel a sense of satisfaction that justice is finally being served." "Justice?" she scoffed. "You call this justice? This is revenge. I call it consequences, something it seems you've managed to avoid your entire life." The call ended. David turned to me. 50 years. She will die in prison." "That's the point," I said. "She wanted my son dead. Now she can spend the next 5 decades thinking about how she failed." My phone buzzed. It was a text from Leo. "How did it go?" "She took the deal. 50 years. Good. Can you come to the hospital? I have some news." I got to the hospital and found Leo sitting up in his bed. The color had returned to his face, and he had a strange, almost triumphant look in his eyes. "Dad, do you remember after Mom died? The lawyer who handled her will? Samuel Price?" "Of course. Why?" "He called me this morning. He said he saw the story on the news. Dad, there's something you never knew. My heart seemed to stop for a second. What are you talking about? Mom set up a trust for me. A big one. $3 million from her life insurance and investments. Samuel has been managing it all these years. I collapsed into the visitor's chair. $3 million? But we barely scraped by after she passed away. I had to take a second job because Mom wanted us to be strong. She wanted us to learn how to stand on our own 2 feet. The trust came with specific rules. I couldn't touch it until I turned 35, or unless I was in a life-threatening situation where someone was trying to harm me for financial gain. You're 35, and someone did try to harm me for money. Isabella, the conditions of the trust have been met. Why didn't you ever tell me? I didn't know about it. Samuel's instructions were to only inform me if the conditions were ever triggered. Apparently, Mom had a feeling something like this could happen. She saw what happened to her own uncle. His wife took him for everything he had. I was speechless. My late wife, Eleanor, always one step ahead, had been protecting our son from beyond the grave. There's more, Leo continued. The trust gives the trustee complete authority over how the funds are used in the event of a divorce or separation resulting from financial abuse. Guess who Mom named as the trustee? Samuel? No, Dad. You've been the trustee for the last 20 years. My hands started to shake. I've been in control of $3 million for 2 decades and had no idea. Mom left a letter explaining everything. Leo handed me an envelope, its paper yellowed by time. Samuel was holding on to it for when the time was right. I opened it with trembling fingers. My wife's handwriting, still so familiar after all these years. My dearest Arthur, if you are reading this, it means our son is in trouble and needs your help. I've watched you all these years. Your strength, your financial wisdom, and your fierce, unwavering love for Leo. I trust no one else with this responsibility. The money is there, tucked away, but it is waiting. Use it to keep him safe. Use it to rebuild anything that someone has tried to destroy. You were always the strong one. All my love, Eleanor. Tears clouded my vision. Even in death, Eleanor was still looking out for us. Dad, Leo said softly. Isabella never knew. She thought she was getting every last cent I had. She had no clue about the trust. The prenup, I gasped. When you suggested a prenup, she threw a fit. But I held firm on one clause, that all premarital assets would remain separate. She signed it, assuming I didn't have any premarital assets. But the trust was established when I was a boy. It's all a premarital asset. David would later describe it as the most elegantly crafted legal safeguard he had ever encountered. Isabella had unknowingly signed away any legal right to the very fortune she had tried to kill for. We need to call Samuel, I said. Samuel Price, now in his late 70s, arrived at the hospital within the hour, carrying a briefcase filled with financial documents. The trust has grown considerably with investments, he explained. It's currently valued at approximately $4.2 million. As the trustee, Arthur, you can authorize immediate payments for Leo's medical care, his rehabilitation, and his living expenses. Every penny goes to Leo's recovery, I said, without a moment's hesitation. Dad, no, Leo interjected. You used your retirement savings to cover my hospital bills. That money gets repaid first. We also need to notify the court of this development, Samuel added. This will impact the restitution order against Isabella. She attempted to murder a man for money that by law she could never have touched. The irony of it was staggering. Isabella had done her homework on everything except the one detail that truly mattered. She had seen Leo's salary, the value of their house, and assumed that was the extent of his wealth. She never could have imagined a hidden trust, protected by the very conditions that her own greedy actions had activated. "There's one more thing," Samuel said. Eleanor included a special clause. If anyone ever made an attempt to harm Leo for financial gain, the trust is authorized to pursue both criminal and civil legal action against that person, with access to unlimited legal resources. Unlimited. She wanted to guarantee that anyone who dared to hurt her son would be utterly and completely ruined. The trust will fund the best prosecutors, the best investigators, whatever is needed. I looked at Leo, my strong son, who had endured so much. Isabella really did pick the wrong family. "Dad," Leo said, "I want to use some of this money to help other people, victims who have been targeted in the same way I was." Even after all he had been through, his first instinct was to help others. That was my son, his mother's heart, his father's resolve. "We'll establish a foundation," I said, "for victims of financial abuse and attempted murder for profit." Samuel smiled. "Eleanor would be so proud of you both." That evening, David called with an update. "Isabella's lawyer just found out about the trust. She's trying to withdraw her guilty plea." "Let her," I said. "Let her stand trial. Let a jury hear that she attempted to commit murder for money she could never have had." "Arthur." David's voice was filled with professional delight. "This is the most stunning reversal of fortune I've witnessed in my entire career. The woman who was certain she had secured everything has, in fact, lost it all. And she doesn't even know the worst of it is yet to come." The courtroom was a media circus. The press had seized on the story, turning it into a local sensation. "The Black Widow of Denver" was a headline that proved too tempting to resist. Isabella sat at the defense table, her public defender looking as though he had already conceded defeat. Leo made his entrance in a wheelchair, a strategic decision advised by David, even though he was now capable of walking with a cane. Let the jury see a visual representation of her actions. I walked next to him, my hand resting on his shoulder. Isabella's eyes widened at the sight of him. She had likely anticipated him being too broken, perhaps even unable to take the stand. Instead, he sat tall and resolute, meeting her gaze with an unwavering stare. The prosecutor, a sharp ADA named Maria Sanchez, was masterful. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "this case is about unmitigated greed, profound betrayal, and a cold, calculated attempt at murder. The defendant, Chloe Martinez, married Leo Vance with a single objective in mind: to end his life and inherit his wealth. Isabella's lawyer attempted to paint the state's case as circumstantial, but the mountain of evidence was simply insurmountable. The severed brake lines, the $1 million insurance policy, the damning Google searches, the suspicious deaths of her previous husbands, and then the bombshell revelation of the trust fund. When I took the stand, ADA Sanchez asked, "Mr. Vance, could you please explain the nature of this trust fund to the court? My late wife, Eleanor, established a $3 million trust for our son. The defendant was completely unaware of its existence. So she attempted to murder your son for money that she was legally barred from ever accessing?" "That is correct. The trust contains an unbreakable clause. In any case of attempted financial exploitation, the spouse is entitled to nothing." I could see the looks of disgust on the faces of the jurors. Isabella had put lives at risk, had destroyed a family, all for a prize that was forever beyond her grasp. Leo's testimony was the most difficult part of the trial. His voice trembled as he recounted the moment he woke up in the hospital and learned that his wife had abandoned him. "I loved her," he said, his voice quiet but clear. "I would have given her anything she ever asked for. She didn't have to do this, but she did do this. Sanchez stated. "She cut the brake lines on your truck and left you for dead." "Yes." Isabella's lawyer began his cross-examination. "Mr. Vance, you don't have a clear memory of the accident itself, do you?" "No, but I do remember my wife insisting that I drive that night, even though I was exhausted. I remember that the brakes felt soft. I remember her taking out a life insurance policy on me without my knowledge." Objection? Speculation. Overruled. The witness is recounting his memories. Then came the prosecution's surprise witness, Julian Croft, Isabella's former lover, looking deeply uncomfortable in a suit that didn't quite fit. "She told me her husband was emotionally abusive," he testified. "She said she needed to get away. I actually believed her until I saw the story on the news. That's when I understood what she really was." "And what did you realize?" "That she was a killer. She had done this before. She told me about her other husbands one night when she was drunk. She said they were practice runs." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Isabella's lawyer was on his feet, objecting wildly, but the statement had been made. The damage was done. An FBI agent was the next to testify, confirming that their investigation had uncovered evidence of foul play in the deaths of both of her previous husbands. "We have reason to believe the defendant has been running this scheme for nearly a decade." When Isabella took the stand in her own defense, she was almost unrecognizable. The confident, manipulative woman was gone, replaced by someone who looked small and desperate. "I never intended for anyone to get hurt," she claimed. "I just wanted some financial security." Sanchez dismantled her testimony on cross-examination. "Financial security? You spent over 30 on luxury goods in Cancun while your husband was lying in a coma." "I was in a state of shock. I wasn't thinking straight." "You were thinking straight enough to forge his signature on a mortgage application." "I needed the money for his medical bills." "Medical bills that you then spent on a penthouse suite and vintage champagne?" Isabella had no response. The jury was out for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder in the first degree, wire fraud, forgery, and identity theft. The sentencing took place 2 weeks later. "Ms. Martinez," the judge began, "I will not refer to you by the name you stole. You are a predator in the truest sense of the word. You seek out good men, you marry them, and then you try to kill them for their money. This court sentences you to life in prison, without the possibility of parole." Isabella began to scream and had to be forcibly removed from the courtroom by the bailiffs. As they dragged her past our aisle, her eyes locked with mine. "This is all your fault," she shrieked. "You ruined my life." "No," I said, my voice calm and steady. "You did this to yourself." Outside on the courthouse steps, we were mobbed by reporters. Leo, now standing with only the support of a cane, spoke with a clear voice. "I want other victims of these kinds of crimes to know that you are not alone. There is no shame in what happened to you. Predators like her exist, but so do people who will stand up and fight for you." "Mr. Vance," one of the reporters called out to me, "how do you feel about the verdict?" "I feel relieved. My son is safe, and now Chloe Martinez can never harm another person again. What's next for you and your family?" I looked at Leo, my son, my survivor. Healing, and then helping others. We are in the process of establishing the Phoenix Foundation for victims of financial abuse and attempted murder for profit. That evening, we celebrated with dinner at Leo's favorite steakhouse. He was walking without any assistance now, having left the cane in the car. "Dad," he said, raising his glass of water. "To Mom, for watching over us, even now." "To Eleanor," I agreed. "And to new beginnings." "And to you, Dad," Leo added, "for never ever giving up." I thought about the journey we had been on, From that night of terror in the ICU to this moment of quiet victory. Family never gives up, I said. Ever. I know that many of you can feel the weight of this moment. Justice was achieved, but the path to recovery is a long one. If you are drawing any strength from this story, please type justice in the comments below. And if there is someone in your life who needs to hear this story, a father, a husband, anyone who is facing financial manipulation, please share this video with them. Sometimes, a single story can change a person's life, giving them the courage they need to fight back. Your support is invaluable to families like mine, who have had to walk through this fire. Now, let me tell you about the miracle that happened next. 6 months after the trial, our lives were completely different. Leo's recovery had surpassed every medical prediction. He was walking, he had returned to work, he was living his life again. The physical scars were healing, but the emotional ones we knew would take more time. The Phoenix Foundation officially opened its doors on a rainy Tuesday in September. We started small, with just a modest 3-room office space in downtown Denver, but it was a beginning. The public response was staggering. In our first week alone, we were contacted by over 300 victims from all over the country. "Dad, you have to hear this one," Leo said, reading an email from his laptop. "My wife cleaned out our life savings and ran off. The police told me it was a civil issue and they couldn't help. I don't know where to turn." We helped that man. We put him in touch with pro bono legal aid. We walked him through the process of asset recovery. We were there for him every step of the way. He got his money back, and he got his life back. Then came the phone call that changed everything. The news program 60 Minutes wanted to feature our story. National television. Leo was hesitant. "That's a massive amount of exposure, Dad." "That's a massive number of victims we could reach," I countered. The interview aired in November. 40 million people watched the story of Isabella's betrayal unfold. They saw Leo's incredible courage, and they learned about the Phoenix Foundation. The next morning, the traffic to our website was so heavy that it crashed. Donations started pouring in. $50,000, $100,000, then $500,000. But the most wonderful surprise came in a different form. Olivia Chen, the ICU nurse who had been so kind to me and had cared for Leo during his most critical days, called him to say she had seen the show and wanted to congratulate him. "I never forgot about you," she told him. "Your recovery, your resilience. It was truly inspiring." They went out for coffee, then for dinner, then another dinner. I watched as my son began to cautiously open his heart again, this time with care and wisdom. "She's different, Dad," he told me. "She saw me at my absolute worst, and she still cares about me." "That's how you know it's the real thing," I said. The Phoenix Foundation expanded. We hired a full-time staff of lawyers, financial analysts, and therapists. We wrote and published a handbook called Surviving Financial Predators, A Guide to Recovery. It quickly became our most sought-after resource. 1 year after the trial, we hosted our first fundraising gala. 300 people were in attendance, including judges, district attorneys, and victims' rights advocates. Leo was the keynote speaker. "A year ago, I was on my deathbed," he began, "not just physically, but emotionally. The woman I had pledged my life to had tried to kill me for money. I was ready to give up, but my father refused to let me. He fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. He stood tall when I couldn't even stand. He taught me that love is not just a word. It is an action. It is the choice to fight for someone, even when they have lost the will to fight for themselves." The room was completely silent, and I could see people dabbing their eyes with their napkins. The Phoenix Foundation isn't just about financial restitution or legal aid, he went on. It's about letting victims know that they are not alone, that they are not foolish for having trusted someone, that they are not weak for having been targeted. They are survivors, and we are here to help them rise from the ashes. The applause was deafening. That night, when I returned home, I found an unmarked envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a cashier's check for 100 and a short handwritten note. "We are so sorry for what our daughter did. Please use this money to help others." It was from Isabella's parents. I sat on my front porch, just looking at the check. Even her own parents had to acknowledge the monster she had become. Their donation would help dozens of victims. Good, rising from the ashes of evil. 3 months later, Leo asked Olivia to marry him, proposing in the very same hospital where their paths had first crossed. She said yes without a moment's hesitation, seeing them together. I finally understood what real love looked like. It was patient, it was kind, and it was built on a foundation of truth, not a web of lies. "Dad," Leo said to me at their engagement party, "I need to tell you something." "What is it, son?" "My doctors told me that, given the severity of my brain injury, I should have either died or been left with permanent disabilities. But I've made a full recovery. They keep calling it a miracle. You're a fighter. You worked hard." "No, Dad. You fought hard. You saved my life. Not just from Isabella, but from my own despair. You gave me a reason to come back." I hugged my son, my miracle, who had survived against impossible odds. The Phoenix Foundation now has branches in 12 states. We have assisted over 500 victims in recovering millions of dollars in stolen assets. We have helped put 15 predators like Isabella behind bars, and our work is just beginning. Isabella remains in a federal penitentiary. She will spend the rest of her life there. Sometimes I think of her, alone in her cell, with the knowledge that she threw away her life for money she could never have possessed. But most of the time, I don't think about her at all. She is a part of the past. We are focused on the future. 1 year later, I stood in a church filled with white roses as I watched my son marry Olivia. He walked down the aisle on his own, strong and self-assured. There was no trace of the broken man who had laid in that ICU bed 2 years before. Olivia was radiant, her eyes never leaving Leo's face. This was a love that was real, honest, and had been forged in fire. "Do you, Leo, take Olivia to be your wife, in sickness and in health?" "I do," he said, his voice ringing with a certainty that stood in stark contrast to the hollow vows Isabella had once made and so easily broken. But Olivia had already proven her commitment, standing by Leo's side through months of grueling recovery and emotional healing. At the reception, Leo asked me to dance. "Thank you, Dad," he whispered, "for everything." "You would have done the same for me," I said. "I had a good teacher." A week after the wedding, a letter arrived at the Foundation's office. It was from Isabella, from prison. My first impulse was to throw it in the fire, but my curiosity got the better of me. "I know you must hate me," she wrote. "I hate myself. Being in here has given me a lot of time to reflect on the person I became. I was so consumed with escaping my past that I turned into something far worse. I became evil. I am sorry. I know those words are meaningless to you, but I am sorry." I never replied. Some bridges are not meant to be rebuilt. Some apologies simply come too late. The Phoenix Foundation received its highest honor that winter, the Presidential Medal for Community Service. Leo and I flew to Washington, D.C., and stood in the White House. "Your story has been an inspiration to millions," the President said to us. "You have transformed a personal tragedy into a public service. We just didn't want anyone else to have to go through that alone, Leo replied. The Foundation's visibility brought us into contact with new allies. Prosecutors began to call on us for our expertise. Banks consulted with us on new fraud prevention strategies. Insurance companies started to fund our programs. We had become the nation's leading authority on crimes committed by financial predators. But the most rewarding moments were the quiet ones. The single mother who was able to recover her retirement savings. The elderly man whose own daughter had tried to steal his pension. The young widower who was targeted by a con artist. Every single victory was precious. "Mr. Vance," a woman said to me through tears in my office one day, "you saved my life." I was ready to give up. "No," I told her, "you saved your own life. We just gave you the tools to fight back." Today, Leo runs the Foundation full-time. Olivia serves as our part-time medical consultant. They are expecting their first child, a little girl. They're going to name her Hope. "Dad," Leo asked me not long ago, "do you think Mom would be proud?" I thought of Eleanor, the woman who had protected her family from beyond the grave, who had anticipated dangers we could never have foreseen and had planned for them. "She would be in awe," I said, "of your strength, your compassion, your resilience. You are everything she ever hoped you would be." The Phoenix Foundation now has a permanent endowment of $50 million. We have helped over 2,000 victims. We have provided training to law enforcement agencies in 400 jurisdictions. We have successfully lobbied for new laws in 17 states. And it all began with a father who refused to allow his son to be a victim. Sometimes, my mind goes back to that night in the ICU, holding Leo's hand, not knowing if he would live or die. The fear, the rage, and the raw determination that took hold of me. I would not wish that ordeal on my worst enemy. But I am grateful for the lesson it taught me. That love is not a passive emotion. Love is a verb. Love fights. Love protects. Love never, ever gives up. Isabella thought she was preying on weakness. Instead, she encountered a strength she could not possibly comprehend. Every morning, I read emails from victims who have found hope because of our work. Every evening, I watch my son and his wife as they build the life he so richly deserves. Every night, I thank Eleanor for her incredible foresight, and I thank God for allowing my son to survive. We rose from the ashes. We became the Phoenix. Sometimes, you have to go to war to protect the ones you love. Thank you for listening to my story. If you or someone you care about is the victim of financial abuse, please do not suffer in silence. Reach out for help. You are worthy of protection and love. Like and subscribe if this story moved you. And comment, Phoenix, if you believe in the power of second chances. I read every comment, and our foundation responds to every single request for assistance. Remember, you are not alone. You are not weak, and you deserve justice. Until we meet again.